Every once in a while, when I kick off an episode of the Fantasy Headliners, I like to quote a great philosopher of our generation. And for this episode of the Fantasy Headliners, it's fitting that I quote the great Nelly by saying, "It's getting hot in here, so take off all your clothes." What's going on, Headliner Nation? Don't worry, nobody is taking off their clothes on this side of the camera. It's Kyle coming to you from the Draft.com studios, and the reason that it's getting hot in here is because we have hot takes for all NFC teams on this episode of the Fantasy Headliners. Now, if you choose to watch this episode at home with no pants on, that's up to you. I can't stop you from doing that. Just don't do it in public. We don't need anybody getting in trouble out there. Before we jump into all of the hot takes for the NFC, though, don't forget the Fantasy Headliners Draft Guide is on sale right now. $19.99 at thefantasyheadliners.com. Over 500 pages of pure fantasy football bliss. So if you've got a draft coming up this week, you don't want to miss out on that. Thefantasyheadliners.com, only $19.99. Get your draft guide today. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, let's talk about hot takes for all of the NFC teams. Before we jump into all the information, though, I just want to put a quick disclaimer on this video. This is a fun episode. We're going to talk about all the teams in the NFC, and we're going to talk some fantasy football here, but keep in mind, this is not a prediction episode, so before you run down to the comments and tell me that I'm lazy or stupid or I don't know what I'm talking about, just remember that a majority of these are probably not going to come true. This isn't hot takes episode. We're talking about things that could potentially happen if everything in the world goes right for this player or these players. There might be a couple in here that you could say, yeah, that could probably end up happening. And there's going to be some here where you say, no, that's definitely not happening. But whatever it may be, a fun episode talking some fantasy football. So we're going to kick it off with the Atlanta Falcons. And the first thing that we're going to talk about with the Atlanta Falcons is Julio Jones. And again, this one might not be that spicy, but maybe it is a little spicy. And the reason it's going to be a little bit spicy is because not only is Julio Jones going to finish as the wide receiver 1 overall in fantasy football this year, but he's going to be a top 5 player. Now, what you may not realize in 2018, you probably know he was the wide receiver 5. But outside of that, he was only 15.2 points behind the wide receiver 1. Now, the issue with Julio Jones has always been the touchdowns, right? Well, 3 extra touchdowns for Julio Jones last year makes him the wide receiver 1. One thing I want you to keep in mind with Julio Jones and the Atlanta Falcons, 13 games are going to be played indoors this season. And even though they have a new offensive coordinator in Dirk Koetter, he is still coming back to work with an offense that he used to work for before he went to Tampa Bay. So this isn't going to be a new offense. This isn't going to be new, really anything for Julio Jones and this team. They've all worked together before. And one of the biggest things, too, is if Devonta Freeman is back and healthy, I think that helps him in the passing game because Devonta Freeman is going to get a lot of looks down in the flats, out of the backfield. He's a guy that defenders are going to have to keep their eye in the backfield a little bit to keep an eye on him. Austin Hooper had a breakout year. Calvin Ridley is a huge red zone threat. Julio Jones cannot be double teamed. He cannot be double covered. He's going to have a lot of one-on-ones this year if he stays healthy and he scores the type of touchdowns that we would love to see from our wide receiver 1. Julio Jones could be in for a huge year. All right, so for the Carolina Panthers, we're going to talk about DJ Moore and the fact that he could finish as a wide receiver 1 this season. I know now we're getting a little bit more spicy, right? Now let's talk about DJ Moore and this Carolina Panthers offense. The one thing that I like about the Panthers offense is all the weapons they do have around Cam Newton. And now the success of the offense is going to be whether or not Cam Newton is healthy. It looks like he's going to be ready to go for week 1. But the reason that DJ Moore could have a big season this year is, number one, if Cam Newton is healthy and he looks like the guy that we've seen in the preseason throwing some of these deep balls, that's awesome. But Curtis Samuel is going to be a huge help to DJ Moore this year. And one of the reasons is because of everything you can do with Curtis Samuel. You can use him out of the backfield. You can put him in the slot. You can put him out wide. You can do a lot of different things with him. They have a lot of weapons that can win out in the flat. Obviously, you have Christian McCaffrey, just talked about Curtis Samuel, and I think a guy that's a little bit under the radar for deeper leagues this year is Chris Hogan. A lot of these guys can win like down in the flat, these short, quick routes, and what that could allow to do is if they do it too much, then defenses are going to creep up, and then DJ Moore being that big deep threat could take the top off the defense and have some really big plays to go along with some hopefully consistent progress that we saw kind of disappear a little bit last year. So again, DJ Moore, wide receiver 1 this year, not the wide receiver 1, a wide receiver 1, so top 12 wide receivers. Could it end up happening? Probably not. But again, if everything happens well with this defense and these weapons stay healthy and Cam Newton is healthy, then this is an offense that, if it's clicking on all cylinders, could produce a surprise at the wide receiver position this year. All right, let's talk about the Chicago Bears. And this one has to be a hot take because I don't necessarily even agree with it. But when looking at everything with the Chicago Bears, we like Anthony Miller this season. We think he could be a really, really great value. We like Allen Robinson as well. So with that being said, how in the world could this hot take be that nobody on the Chicago Bears finishes in the top 24 of their position except for David Montgomery? And the reason I'm going with this as a hot take, because what if the inconsistencies we saw from Mitchell Trubisky from last year continue into this year? He's been up and down in preseason and training camp. What if he doesn't take the next step forward? What if a lot of these defenses that saw this offense for the first time last year start to key on some different things and say, hey, we can beat this offense. How can we do that, and how can we keep them off the field? Obviously, the Bears have a very, very good defense. Now, are they going to have to win games with their defense again this year? David Montgomery is going to be a do-it-all running back. Yes, Tariq Cohen is going to still get a lot of work in the passing game, but David Montgomery can also get work in the passing game. He's underrated as a pass catcher, but he's going to be a guy that gets the majority of the carries. This could be a guy that if Mitchell Trubisky continues to be inconsistent and have some issues, maybe they start to ride the run game a little bit more. They have the weapons to keep teams honest. Anthony Miller, Allen Robinson, already talked about them. Cohen, they could do some different things. Taylor Gabriel is still there. And then obviously Trey Burton at tight end. So again, it's the inconsistencies that could do this team in this year. You could get some good weeks that could help you win a fantasy week, but you could also get some really bad weeks that could help you lose a fantasy week. But with all that being said, when you look at the very end of the season, if these inconsistencies continue to be a little bit more down than up, then you're going to see a lot of players on this offense struggle this year, and David Montgomery is going to be the only one that really stands out as a running back too. To continue on the Hot Take Express, we're going to move down to Dallas now, and Dak Prescott, Amari Cooper, and Ezekiel Elliott are all going to finish as top 12 options at their position. A quarterback 1, a running back 1, and a wide receiver 1. Now, why is this a hot take? Well, number one, because the QB position is so deep this year that even if you're the QB 15 or 16, you can only be a couple of points off being a QB1. So even though he might not finish as one, he could finish decently close. Ezekiel Elliott, that's not really a hot take. However, is he going to show up? I still think he's playing week 1. They're going to get something done. Keeping your fingers crossed, but if it doesn't happen, that could definitely be an issue. And then Amari Cooper, what's going to happen with him? He was really up and down. He was inconsistent last year. I like Amari Cooper. I think he has wide receiver 1 upside, but he's going to have to be more consistent to be a wide receiver 1 overall. So with all that being said, a lot of things could go very right with this offense. They have a very good defense down in Dallas. This is a team that can stay very balanced, but I think for the first time, you're going to see a little bit, it's been a little bit of a vanilla offense the last couple of years, but I think this year you're going to see this team really kind of break out a little bit more. Michael Gallup is there. He could have a decent season as well, be a really nice best ball play for you with a lot of big potential on the outside there. So again, a lot of things have to go right. Zeke has to show up. Cooper has to stay consistent. Dak Prescott's really going to have to shine. But if all that comes together, all three of these guys are going to be within the top 12 at their position. You know we love Kerryon Johnson here on the Fantasy Headliners. There might still be some concerns on what's going to happen with his workload. But let's take a step back for a second and move away from the high running back 2 that I think Kerryon Johnson can be. What if he's more of just a safe running back 2? But what if CJ Anderson is taken out of the equation? So if CJ Anderson just can't produce and they start to lean on Kerryon Johnson a little bit more in the run game, then a fellow by the name of Ty Johnson could stand out a little bit. And Ty Johnson is a guy that could really help in the passing game. So if this Detroit Lions offense is going to focus heavily on the running backs this year, which with Darrell Bevell in the past has been accurate, you could see a lot of good things with both of these guys. Now, the defense is not going to be very good in Detroit this year. Even as a Lions fan, you can see some stuff there behind me. Even as a Lions fan, I'm being realistic with this team this year. The defense is not going to be that good. They're probably going to have to pass a little bit still, but they're still going to try to control the game on the ground. So Kerryon Johnson is going to get more than enough workload carrying the ball and catching the ball every once in a while. But Ty Johnson can be a guy that steps out and in PPR leagues has a pretty decent season. Again, if we remove CJ Anderson from the equation because he's ineffective, injured, whatever it may be, and then Kerryon Johnson moves into more of the workload on the ground, and Ty Johnson helps in the passing game. So with this hot take, I'm saying Kerryon Johnson and Ty Johnson both finish as a running back 2 in PPR leagues this year. Staying in the NFC North, we're going to talk about a guy that we liked on this channel a lot last season, broke out a little bit, and then just disappeared out of nowhere. Marquez Valdes-Scantling. Now, he's been dealing with Geronimo Allison trying to win that wide receiver 2 spot. Early indications are he's got a decent grasp on that. But the one thing that we could see, if Marquez Valdes-Scantling wins that wide receiver 2 spot on the Green Bay Packers, is a guy that can go inside and outside. He's a guy that they can play in the slot and mismatch against a lot of people. He's a guy that can play on the outside and burn a lot of people for some deep plays. So with the Green Bay Packers, my bold prediction, or not bold prediction, my hot take for 2019 is that Marquez Valdes-Scantling not only wins the wide receiver 2 position for the Green Bay Packers, but he finishes as a wide receiver 2 overall in all of fantasy football. For this hot take, we're going to talk about the Los Angeles Rams. I'm going to give a shout out to one of our writers here at the Fantasy Headliners, Miguel Chapin. If you don't know who that is, he did a couple of episodes over the season with Jake right around the NFL draft. He's a guy that really knows his wide receivers, but he takes a step away from wide receivers in an upcoming article on the Fantasy Headliners, and he talks about Gerald Everett from the Los Angeles Rams. I don't want to give away the entire article, but I just want to give you a piece of this because my hot take for 2019 with the Rams is that Gerald Everett is a tight end 1. Now, Miguel talks about a lot of different things in this article. He talks about Sean McVay and wanting to run 11 or 12 personnel and maybe changing some things up and adapting and growing with his offense. Last year, during the regular season, Gerald Everett only played 34% of team snaps. But once they got to the playoffs and in the NFC Championship and in the Super Bowl, he played 68% of the team snaps. So we saw as the season went on, especially in the playoffs when it mattered most, they relied on him to be on the field a little bit more. Now, one thing you could look at is maybe he was on the field more because they were running the ball a little bit more with CJ Anderson and they felt that they needed an extra blocker. But, maybe Sean McVay also said that I've got a weapon here that I could use and get a lot of value out of, a guy that could make some big plays. We saw him make some big plays. He made a big play against the Kansas City Chiefs in that shootout. So maybe Miguel is onto something. Maybe Gerald Everett does have value as a tight end 1 this season. For the Minnesota Vikings in 2019, I wouldn't say this is a super hot take, but they're going to have a few things go right. Now, I love this offense. I've talked about this offense quite a bit on this channel. Dalvin Cook is a top 5 running back if he's at least playing in 14 games this season. But one thing with this hot take is, again, this offense is really going to have to step up, but I think they're really close. So for this one, not only does Kirk Cousins finish in the top 12 of their position, not only does Dalvin Cook finish there, not only does Kyle Rudolph finish there, but either Stephon Diggs or Adam Thielen will also finish as a top 12 option at their position this year. So a tight end 1, a QB 1, a running back 1, and a wide receiver 1. Now, we've seen it happen with other offenses. I mean, heck, an offense like the Kansas City Chiefs did it, right? Now, Minnesota is nowhere near the Kansas City Chiefs, so before you comment below and tell me that I'm an idiot for comparing the Kansas City Chiefs and the Minnesota Vikings, I'm just saying there are offenses that can do that. Now, this is an offense that I think is going to have some big plays, but is mainly going to control the game on the ground. But with all that being said, Kirk Cousins was really close. He was the QB 13 or 14, depending on your league settings and things like that. He was really close to being a QB 1 last year. Dalvin Cook obviously was injured a lot, but he has that type of upside, right? Adam Thielen and Stephon Diggs were both really, really good. Kyle Rudolph has been a tight end 1 before, but he can lose some snaps to Irv Smith Jr. But again, this is an offense that could function really, really well. This is an offense that could be in for a huge year because they're not only so balanced, but they have so many playmakers. Their defense, if they were to bend a little bit and they get into some shootouts, it's an offense that I definitely could see keeping up with other people. And it's an offense that I could see producing top 12 options at every single position on the field. For the New Orleans Saints, now this one might be the spiciest of all hot takes for this episode, but I'm going to go out on a limb here. And for the Saints hot take, I'm going to say Alvin Kamara not only finishes as the number 1 overall player in 2019, but he puts together the best fantasy season for a running back ever. That's right. Alvin Kamara could be in for a huge year in 2019. We've seen this guy finish as an elite top option each of the last 2 years in a backfield where Mark Ingram was the main guy. Not really the main guy, but he was the main early down running back. So what if Alvin Kamara gets a lot of that workload? What if Latavius Murray gets more than enough workload, but Kamara comes in and he stays super efficient like he's been the last 2 years? He increases what he's done on the ground, and now you've got a guy that could score well into the double digits worth of touchdowns. We've got a guy that could go 1,000 and 1,000 very easily, and we've got a guy that, again, has been hyper efficient his first 2 years. A lot of things are going to have to go right for him. I've been leaning in my rankings, putting Alvin Kamara up as the number 1 overall fantasy player. I don't know if I'm going to end up doing it or not. I'm going to look a little bit more into it before I submit my final rankings next week before the season. But my hot take is that Alvin Kamara, again, not only finishes as the top overall fantasy scorer in 2019, but puts together the best fantasy season ever for a running back. For the New York Giants hot take, I'm going to say that not only does Daniel Jones start at least 8 games for the Giants this year, but at the end of the season, he is a top 10 quarterback in terms of points per game. So kind of similar to what we saw last year with Lamar Jackson, right? Lamar Jackson overall for the season was not a quarterback 1 because he didn't play all season. He didn't have that many points racked up. But if you look at Lamar Jackson on a points per game basis, from the time that he became a starter till the end of the season, that is when he became a quarterback 1. Again, on a points per game basis, not overall for the entire season. So with Daniel Jones, he's looked really good this preseason, right? He's looked like a guy that is making the Giants look smart right now. But as long as they have a quarterback that can at least do something that's better than Eli Manning, if Daniel Jones comes in and is that quarterback, they've got some weapons there. They've got Saquon Barkley, obviously. They've got Evan Ingram. They've got Sterling Shepard. They've got Golden Tate. So they have some different options there to win some ball games. Now, let's keep in mind, too, that defense, I don't think that defense is going to be very good this year. So if that's the case, when you play in a division with the Philadelphia Eagles and the Dallas Cowboys, you're going to have to play keep up quite a bit. So if that ends up happening and he runs into some games where he's going to have to throw the ball a little bit, at the end of the season, based on points per games for the games that Daniel Jones starts, he could potentially be a quarterback 1. All right, so my hot take for the 2019 Philadelphia Eagles is going to be Miles Sanders finishes as a running back 1. Now, he's going to have some things go right. Jordan Howard would likely have to have an injury, or they would have to trade him and walk away from him. Would that be the craziest thing in the world? No. They have a lot of running backs. What if a team like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers came calling, or the Houston Texans, and they were to give them back a pick maybe a little bit earlier than the one that they gave for Jordan Howard? Well, if anything were to happen like that, then Miles Sanders becomes the unquestioned running back 1 in that backfield. Something I've said about the Eagles a lot this offseason that a lot of people haven't agreed with is that I think they're going to run the ball a lot more than what we've seen in years past. They have a really good defense. They have a good offensive line. They have a lot of running backs that they can use to keep guys healthy. But the main purpose is let's keep Carson Wentz upright and let's keep the ball out of his hands a little bit more often just so we don't have to worry about him taking off and running downfield or getting sacked, getting knocked around. Whatever it may be, Carson Wentz, they can't afford to lose him again this year. They don't have Nick Foles ready to step in at the end of the season, so they're going to have to keep him healthy. And with that being said, they can control the game on the ground. They control the game through the defense, and they're able to still score a lot of points and win a lot of ball games. I think that they're going to finish second in that division behind the Cowboys this year, but Miles Sanders could be in for a really big year if he becomes the unquestioned starter there. Maybe this isn't that hot of a take for the San Francisco 49ers, but I'm going to throw out there that Matt Breida takes over as the main running back in San Francisco and finishes the season as a running back too. He'd have to beat out Tevin Coleman, and he would have to hope that Jerick McKinnon just doesn't come back and make that big of an impact. But can it be done? Sure, why not? He was really good last year. We've talked about Matt Breida. Actually, if you want to hear more about him, I did a video a couple of weeks ago on high upside, high risk plays. Matt Breida was one of those guys that I put in there. A lot of good stats. Go check it out. But with that being said, he takes over as the main running back. This is the guy that's relied upon, that was really good in terms of catching the ball and running the football both last year. He was very consistent at times, and he had a little bit of upside to go with it. So if that happens this year, Matt Breida takes over that backfield, steals the job away from Tevin Coleman, goes out and has himself a good season, and he becomes a running back too for the year. So for the Seattle Seahawks, this probably isn't that big of a hot take, because I'm just going to go ahead and throw out here that both Chris Carson and Rashad Penny finished the season as a running back too. Kind of similar to what I said about the Detroit Lions. I mean, this is a team that was running the football every chance that they got last year. More than likely, they're going to be doing more of the same this year. But if they're basically splitting the workload, they're going to run the ball more than enough that Chris Carson, if he gets the main amount of carries and throws in a few receptions, and Rashad Penny, if he gets the most receptions out of the two, not of everyone on the team, we're not going there. But if he gets the most receptions out of the two and still gets a workload on the ground, kind of similar to maybe what Mike Davis did last year as well, then this is a team that if they run the ball more than enough and they're efficient with their carries and their catches, then both of these guys could finish as a running back too, and you've got a nice little tandem out there in Seattle. For the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in 2019, I'm going to toss out, not only does Chris Godwin finish ahead of Mike Evans in fantasy points, but he also is a wide receiver one on the season. Maybe this is a spicy hot take, and maybe it's just a little bit more mild. Maybe one's a jalapeno, one's a banana pepper. I don't know. You make the judgment, but I got a few numbers to go with it here. So listen up. Let's talk about Chris Godwin. So Chris Godwin, we've already heard from Bruce Arians. He wants Chris Godwin to be on the field all the time. He wants Chris Godwin to play the slot role, the Larry Fitzgerald role. So with that being said, what did Larry Fitzgerald do with Bruce Arians from 2014 to 2017? 2014, I am going to toss that one out the window. He had some injury issues. He only played in 14 games, but Larry Fitzgerald played in 16 games in 2015, 16, and 17. During that time frame, he averaged 152 targets, 108 receptions, 1,131 yards, and 7 touchdowns. Would we be surprised if Chris Godwin put up numbers that were similar or close to that? I think a lot of people right now probably would say no, they wouldn't be super surprised. During that time frame, Larry Fitzgerald finished as the wide receiver 5, the wide receiver 12, and the wide receiver 9 in half PPR leagues. So is it really that far out there to say that Chris Godwin could finish as a wide receiver 1 if he played that same type of role? I know we're comparing him to a future Hall of Famer by saying that, but I'm not really comparing them either. I'm just saying, what did Larry Fitzgerald do in that role for Bruce Arians? And if he puts Chris Godwin in the same type of situation, can he make it happen? I don't know. There's a lot to be seen with that one. I love Mike Evans this year. I think Chris Godwin is a real nice value, but that team is going to throw it a lot this year. They're going to have to pass. They're going to have to score points. They're going to be able to do that. If Chris Godwin is on the field that much and moving around, he could have a lot of mismatches. He could have a big year. For the Arizona Cardinals, a hot take here is a pretty easy one to predict, but it's Kyler Murray. How high is too high, though? Well, what about quarterback 5? Yes, the quarterback position is going to be bunched up this year. We've talked about it a lot on this channel. You could take someone as the quarterback 8, and between quarterback 8, quarterback 15, it's only going to be a couple of points. But with Kyler Murray, he has everything that you would need to be able to stand out. Now, you wish his offensive line was a little bit better, but maybe having an offensive line is going to cause him to scramble more. And if he's scrambling and picking up yards on the ground, he could have some rushing TDs. He could toss some TDs through the air. But having that ability to pick up those extra points on the ground is what could separate him from other quarterbacks in fantasy football. Cliff Kingsbury, I'm going to say it. He's one of the better offensive minds in all of football. It might not show right now. A lot of people don't think that the college game is going to translate, but give the guy a chance. He's a good, smart dude that knows what he's doing. He could do a lot with this offense this year. He could get David Johnson involved quite often, and if that happens, then it makes Kyler Murray even better. Christian Kirk could take the next step, and then, of course, you've got Larry Fitzgerald, who could be in for a big year as well. Kyler Murray, top 5 quarterback, hot take for the Arizona Cardinals. The final one for the Washington Redskins, my hot take in 2019 is that they finish with a winning record. That's it. That's all I have for Washington. They're not going to be very good. I like Darius Geis. I do. Their defense isn't going to be that good, okay? Their offense isn't going to be that good. I'm sorry. I'm not very high on the Washington Redskins. I think this is a team that's headed for at least a top 10 pick. If you're a Redskins fan out there, I apologize. I don't mean to hate on them. Just from a fantasy standpoint, there's not a lot that can go right with that team this season. Maybe it's Darius Geis. Who knows? Jordan Reed, I thought, was a bright spot, but at this point, that guy should just hang it up and be done with his career. Try to live a decent life after this, after all those concussions. But honestly, my hot take is that they finish with a winning record. They're going to be in a tough division. They're going to have a tough time this season with their schedule. I don't see a lot of good things happening until next year. We'll see what happens. Sorry, Redskins fans. Don't mean to disappoint you. I just don't think it looks that good. There you have it. Hot takes for every single NFC team. And again, this is just a fun episode. I'm not predicting any of these things are going to happen. I'm not putting this in stone or putting my stamp of approval on it. It's just fun to do these things before the season kicks off, talk about some what-if scenarios, some perfect scenarios for different players, and to just throw that information out there and chat about it a little bit more. Don't forget, though, if you're not a part of Headliner Nation already and you're new to the channel, hit subscribe and let us know in the comments below. Not only am I going to personally welcome you, but if anyone else is scrolling through the comments and you see someone say that they're new to the channel, welcome them to Headliner Nation. Give a thumbs up on that comment. Also, not only hit subscribe, hit the like button on this video. And then if you need a draft guide, if you're going to be drafting this week, $19.99 at thefantasyheadliners.com. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'll see everyone on the next episode. Have a good one.